Thanks, Senator Scott. First question to all three of you, and please just answer yes or no. It's pretty straightforward. Do you agree that individual executives whose mismanagement and disregard for basic banking principles that led to the failure of these banks should face meaningful consequences for their action? Professor Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Quadman?
Yes, if the information shows that.
Yes.
Professor, thank you. It's clear, and this is for you, Professor Schooner, it's clear that in the case of SVB and Signature, bank executives failed to properly oversee and manage the risk of their institutions. Their compensation was tied to profits, which incentivized them to grow their banks. And the SVB was almost unprecedented in the speed at which it grew. They also rewarded themselves with bonuses in the weeks and months leading up to their failure, even when regulators were raising red flag after red flag after red flag about risks at that bank. Do we need to deter this type of information by individual executives ahead of time so we can avoid a potential failure that put customers, the banking system, and ultimately taxpayers at risk?
Yes, Senator. I think that we need to focus on the ongoing operations of banks in a safe and sound manner, and we shouldn't send the signal to bank executives that when the bank fails, they can walk away and that's it. I think that's the wrong kind of incentive. So we need to encourage prudent operations and management while banks are operating.
Thank you. Professor Lynn, you've found that bank executives are rarely barred from the industry when they've engaged in mismanagement or poor supervision. Why is the existing removal power not suited for the executives of big banks like SVB and Signature?
Thank you, Senator. There are two obstacles. The first is the culpability requirement, which currently is demanding. It requires personal dishonesty or a willful or continuing disregard for the safety and soundness of the institution. And especially in larger banks, the challenge of proving willful complexity increases as to the distance of the wrongdoing. Executives today are shielded from liability because of the diffuse decision-making structure that exists in most large and mid-sized institutions. Second, there is a mismatch between the responsibilities of bank executives and directors, which focus on systemic oversight, putting into place systems, internal controls, structures that promptly detect and efficiently deter operational risks, and the focus of the current authority to prohibit bankers from the industry, which narrowly focuses on discrete activities and whether or not there was knowledge of and participation in discrete wrongdoing. So I have two recommendations. The first is to adjust the culpability requirement, lowering it to perhaps recklessness or negligence. And the second is to identify mismanagement and oversight failure as a discrete basis for removal and prohibition from the industry.
Thank you. Last question, Ms. Schooner. Unlike many other countries that only have a handful of mega banks, the U.S. banking system has thousands of small banks that serve local communities. How would strengthening our enforcement tools to hold bank executives accountable not only help prevent failures, but also improve fairness and competition between large and small banks?
So, Senator, the reality is that most administrative enforcement actions are brought against the managers of failed institutions. And since mega banks don't fail, that means that they escape that kind of accountability. So I think reforming the administrative enforcement power that agencies currently have to better reach the managers of operating institutions would help level that playing field.
And I think all of us were concerned about the GSIBs that seem to get larger and larger, even those that have not performed particularly well. Wells Fargo is always the one that jumps to mind. That all of those banks got bigger with migration of deposits after after SVB and Signature. Deposits were moving to those big banks, including Wells Fargo, to tens and tens of billions of dollars. And then what happened just this week with FDIC choosing, under whatever decision making that was done, choosing JP Morgan Chase. Senator Vance from Ohio is recognized.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.